Hello friends, today we will be taking a deeper look into Helms' White Identity Development Model. We will start with a brief overview of the model, then explore the models further using various tools of deconstruction, and end with some thoughts on future implementations. Let's begin. So what is Helms' model of white identity development? The model has two sequential phases: abandonment of racism and evolution of a non-racist identity. In abandonment of racism phase, a white person transitions out of an unaware or naive view of race. Typically, this is caused by an incident that causes dissonance with the individual's previously unexplored concept of their race. The next phase, evolution of a non-racist identity, involves deep reflection and interaction with people of color. In this phase, white people start to understand their role as racial beings and how the privileges of their race affects others. And this phase is a never-ending process as individuals work towards understanding themselves and other racial groups. Let's use an example to illustrate this model. Meet Kyle. Kyle is a white male who has never had to question his whiteness before due to growing up in a predominantly white community. One day, Kyle was listening to a podcast from one of his favorite influencers who is Asian. On the podcast, the influencer told a story of how they experienced blatant racism at a restaurant from someone calling them a racial slur, which Kyle frequently used. Kyle didn't know that the word he was using had such a negative impact on other racial groups. Upon deeper reflection on his actions, Kyle is now more aware of his power he possesses as a white male in choosing the language he uses. This is the first phase, or abandonment of racism. From then on out, Kyle takes it upon himself to discover who he is and what being a white male means to him, and how he can encourage others to do the same. This is an example of the second phase, evolution of a non-racist identity. This is a canonical theory because it is one of the few educational theories that has been accepted to explicitly define white identity development within the framework of race. Also, when it comes to white identity development, this is the most researched theory raising awareness among white people regarding racism in society and their responsibility to dismantle it.
In 1999, Helms revised her model based on several critiques, such as needing a call to action and needing interaction with people of color. The revised model took the original 2 phases and expanded them into 6 more evolved phases. In the pseudo-independence phase, Helms addressed the need to have interaction with people of color to confront and uncover racism. In the immersion and immersion phase, Helms created a call to action to have white people get involved with social action. While this updated model did address some issues, there are still areas that can be improved. Now we will move on to the deconstruction of the model utilizing various tools of deconstruction. We will present 2 different ideological critiques, investigate how flow of power is observed, and explore an area of willful blindness in the model.
The first tool of deconstruction that we will use is an ideological critique of a stock of knowledge present in the model. An underlying core belief of Helms' model of white identity development is that it assumes that all white people know that their white identity contains inherent values of racism. However, this is not always the case. How can someone identify their oblivious or naive conceptions of race if they are only surrounded by people who look similar to them? Without exposure to people who look, think, and act differently than them, a person cannot explore their racial identity further than what is presented to them. Therefore, assuming that all white people are able to explore their identity and find racist overtones is not correct. For example, Robin DiAngelo explains in the article, Right Fragility, that people of color are always seen as having a race, but white people are not viewed in racial terms. This causes people of color to receive the full negative impacts of racism, while white people are shielded from the physical burden of race. Through only being surrounded by other white people, this racial group can never fully comprehend their white privilege and the impact that it has on other racial groups.
Another ideological critique we will explore is that Helms's model exclusively groups white people into racist or non-racist categories without acknowledging various levels of racism. This grouping causes an oversimplification of racism so that the model can be more easily understood. While being easily understood is a good thing, it also causes generalizations that cannot be broadly applied. For example, there is a white woman who is openly against all racial terrorist groups, but clutches her purse when she sees a black man walking past her. She would be grouped into the same category as a member of the Ku Klux Klan who bombs a black church because they see black people as being biologically inferior. Although the white woman openly sees actions of the KKK as egregious, her fear based on stereotypes is seen to be just as racist as the terrorist act because Helms does not define levels of racism.
Another tool of deconstruction we will illustrate is flow of power, which points out how majoritized people set the rules and standards over minoritized groups. Though Helms's model seeks to draw attention to white privilege, it fails to acknowledge the fact that white people are still creating the standard of what is considered racist or non-racist. An example of this could be the acceptance of colorblindness. Asserting colorblindness denies the lived experiences of people of color by white people, which in itself is a privilege. Let's consider Jared and Karen. Jared is with his friend Karen, listening to a live performance of one of his favorite hip-hop artists, Amine. During the song Caroline, Jared notices that instead of saying the N-word, Amine substitutes it with, "If you're not black, don't say it." After the song is over, Karen mentions to Jared, "I don't see the problem with saying the N-word if it's part of the song, even if I'm not black. I think it's fine to say it since everyone is just singing the lyrics." Karen's belief that she should be able to say a word that is typically used as a slur, even though she is white, is indicative of colorblindness. Using Helms' model, Karen could see herself having a non-racist white identity because she set that standard. Karen is able to use her white privilege to manipulate the model to suit her beliefs. The last tool of deconstruction we will implement is willful blindness. Helms's focus on racism causes the model to ignore the fact that one can still hold prejudiced thoughts and not be racist, which maintains white privilege. In fact, the model only alludes to prejudice through acknowledging naive conceptions of race in the first phase. In simple terms, racism is the belief that your race is superior to other races, while prejudice is the maintaining of unproven stereotypes of others. Therefore, not all prejudice is conventionally negative. For example, a white person may not be racist, but still think that all blacks are athletic, all Asians are good at math, or all Latinos and Hispanics can speak Spanish. While all of these conceptions are false, the white person is not putting their race above the others, but is promoting prejudiced beliefs through their ignorance. Do the previous statements make a white person racist? No, because they do not see themselves as superior to other racial groups. Do the statements show prejudice of those racial groups? Yes, because their logic was based on stereotypes. People can hold preconceived notions and prejudice, but not see themselves as racially superior. However, since the model is willfully blind to prejudice, a white person going through the model may ignore their prejudice against other racial groups.
Moving forward, if this model were to undergo another revision, we would suggest looking into expanding how racism is defined and utilizing more categories for development. We would also suggest looking into the importance of creating and maintaining meaningful relationships with people of color instead of just having interactions with this group. Overall, though the model still needs some work, it does provide a good foundation for starting conversations about white identity development and the role white privilege plays in maintaining a racist society. As more white people explore their privilege and question racist norms, we can start to create a better society for all.